say. You win. Perfect.
Okay. Oyo Games, Game Informer. Wait, December 351. Gotta be December. 2022. Let's check it out. Ads. All right, leading a voice. All right, in my 18 years as Game Informer, there's one impression I wish I could do a better job of sharing with our readers. That's the incredible creativity, diverse ideas, and collaborative mindset of the folks working in gaming. Helping push some of those voices forward to a broader audience has been a highlight of my career. All right, yeah, we're gonna skip that. All right, so I'm trying to get this thing done in under an hour again. Maybe if I'm smart, I'll try to drop them down to 30 minutes. All right, Bayonetta, we read that last month. So, all right, considering the Mario movie is next year, when and what do you expect from the next 3D Mario game? All right, it's been 5 years since we embarked on the superb Super Mario Odyssey, and I think it's safe to say we're all ready to learn what's next for Nintendo's mascot. Last year, we perhaps got a taste of the franchise's future through Bowser's Fury, a side game included in the Switch release of Super Mario 3D World. That title presented players with a small open world experience in which Mario could move from one obstacle course to another without worrying about backing out into a hub world or transitioning through loading screens. We'd love to see that fun proof of concept make it into a full-fledged game. With The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom coming out in May, hopefully we'll hear something about what's next for Mario around the same time frame. Right, sound off. Have you ever caught yourself humming or whistling a song from a game in which you poured a ton of hours? Kind of like that Street Fighter 2. Video games have long featured some of the best music of any entertainment medium, accentuated by the fact that we spend so much time in those worlds that we often become intimately familiar with those songs that play repeatedly. We asked our community which video game franchises had the best soundtrack. Here are some of their responses. Persona 5, Royal, Cody Gibson. Best video game soundtrack, the Final Fantasy series, hands down. From One Winged Angel to Xanarkand. From Terror's Theme to Victory Fanfare, Legend of Gamer 102. The Elder Scrolls games all pretty much have good soundtracks. The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind deserves its own very high podium. GTA, particularly San Andreas, all the good old hip-hop through there. Final Fantasy, Yakuza, Ryu, Gagatoko, I don't even know that. This has been the hardest question of all time. There can't be just one, and I won't choose just one. Two main ones would be the World of Warcraft and the Final Fantasy game, and two would have blown Godfall and, Paper Mario. Listen to the Max Power. All right. Nerf guns and sound systems? Nah. Building characters. I recently finished playing Xenoblade Chronicles, and I was just and I was just amazed at how I cried at Chapter 5. It was like this for Chapter 1 of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition and Chapter 10 of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Even though the very beginning, the writers at Monolith Soft, crying, gonna skip that, marching to your own beat. I've seen nothing but negativity about the new Saints Row. I don't care what the haters say. You guys are spot on in your review. I absolutely love it. I'm sure you've gotten lots of hate over it, but just know that at least one person understands that reviews are opinions. Premium PlayStation, Gone Fishing, The Making of Mina the Hollower. I'm guessing it's a roguelike since everything's a roguelike nowadays. Alec Faulkner is a talented up-and-coming game designer with Yacht Club Games, the developer and publisher behind the Shovel Knight series. He lives in a converted backyard garage in LA, a quaint, sunlit studio decorated with retro gaming memorabilia and plants. Oh man. And plants cultivated during isolation, where he is hard at work at Yacht Club's next big project, Mina the Hollower. Before enrolling in the University of Southern Cali's game development program, he studied video editing at the school's film department. I was really into editing, mostly because the pressure of being on set and getting all the footage in. Yeah, I tried to keep it kind of dark in here, but man, let me throw on some more light though. All right, Faulkner tells me while hard grinding coffee beans for his morning cup, and I prefer working on a project that can take a year or a few years. You have plenty of time to make sure it's all perfect. I guess that's the perfectionist in me, unable to work in a faster paced environment. All right. After graduating USC with a couple of game projects under his belt, Faulkner joined Yacht Club Games as an intern in 2016 to help bring Shovel Knight Spectre of Tournament across the finish line. 7 years later, he's directing the development of Mina the Hollower, the studio's first new 2D series since 2013. Surprisingly, Mina the Hollower was never supposed to be Yacht Club's next big game. Instead, it was Faulkner's secret side project, a small game he was developing to hone his art and programming skills in his free time. I was really into Game Boy games at the time. I got a Game Boy Flash cartridge and a nice backlit screen. Shout out to Lauren of Little Rock Game Designers. She loves her Game Boy designing. Faulkner says, I was playing a million games and thinking, this pixel art style is extremely appealing. It's very bizarre that nobody does anything with it. Plenty of people do. They had a new console even made about Game Boy games. He began creating Game Boy inspired pixel art and posting it to social media for fun. Then he began programming, creating a simple top-down camera and a character capable of moving around in an environment. Development continued on Faulkner's own time, and the top-down prototype codenamed Gothic became good enough for his boss to notice. Now, nearly 4 years later, his side project has raised over $1.2 million via crowdfunding and is the sole focus of the team leading at Yacht Club. When I first heard about Mina, I was really scared, Yacht Club founder and Shovel Knight director Sean Valesco recalls. I thought, oh Jesus, Alec will leave the company and bring this game with him. But sure enough, he said, no, maybe we should do this project. Mina should be our next game. Shovel Knight is a medieval side-scrolling platformer, and Yacht Club wanted a new game that would pair well with it. If Shovel Knight was our Mario, what would our Zelda be? And that's where Mina the Hollower fit the bill, Valesco said. Mina the Hollower is a 2D action-adventure game about the inventive mouse studying the earth and its underground as a hollower, a pseudo-scientist capable of burrowing deep in the ground, trying to rescue an island in peril. Mina uses hollower abilities to dodge hazards, leap to far off edges, defeat bosses, and reach secret areas in the dungeon and overworld she explores. She also wields a whip, keeping her distance while dismantling enemies in combat. Like Shovel Knight, Faulkner's brainchild facilitates creativity through its retro-inspired limitations. Specifically, it abides by the Game Boy Color's technical specifications. For example, the game's 8-bit sprites only allow for 4 colors per tile, and there aren't any 3D assets. According to Valesco and Faulkner, embracing limitations like these at a project's start establishes a strong foundation and strong development in a positive direction. All right, let's kind of breeze through to the last paragraph. Sometimes I think what Mina would have liked, like if I kept this to myself and didn't bring it to Yacht Club, and it was just my little thing, and I think that would have been a disaster, he exclaims, holding back a laugh. It feels like I should be worried about what happens if this game sucks. I'm going to have wasted everybody's time, but that's not a worry because everyone will catch me, and no one will let this game suck. No one would let me, even if I tried to make it suck. Everyone would identify the problems and make a plan to fix it. So I feel very blessed that I have so many people that I can trust to hold me accountable, hold the project accountable, and keep everything running smoothly. All right, there goes that art. Will it be the next Shovel Knight? I don't know. I can't call it. New battles. Ryu Ga Gotaku Studio. Okay, that's what that was about. Okay, it's September 13th, and Ryu Ga Gotoku Studio is just over 24 hours away from revealing its big plans for the future. Celebs. Okay, there's confidence in the way that the RGG staff speaks. It could be mistaken for cockiness, and perhaps it is to a degree, but in its defense, especially in the last few years, RGG has the games and sales to back up their confidence. Things might be changing around here, but the team is still laser focused on its long-running crime series. There's time to let conversations go off topic because as far as the 7 leads are concerned, no matter what's changed or what will change, it's still business as usual, even if it isn't really. Okay, so Neon Genesis Evangelion. Base today, instead of focusing on his big, bright studio head, Masayoshi Yokoyama is sitting in a conference room talking about why he loves Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you watch a VHS tape enough times, the plastic tape inside it will start ripping, and then you won't be able to see it anymore, he says. But if you actually just take tape and tape it back up, it will work again. I watched my Evangelion tape and had to repair it 3 or 4 times. Sounds like Biggie. I let my tape rock to my tape pop. Smoking private stock. Something else he said. I forget. All right. Saving face. In October 2021, RGG lost his face, kind of. It depends on who you ask. Since its inception, Toshihiro Nagoshi, a then 30-year-old veteran of parent company Sega, has been a recognizable founder and head of RGG. He often spoke of the series and the studio in his interviews, especially outside of Japan. When people think about the Yakuza series, there's a good chance you might also think of Nagoshi. Despite his age, it didn't hurt that he was always ahead of the curve regarding fashion and trends. It was a common sentiment to say that he looked like the characters from his games. All right, Yakuza series. All right, we just blasting through. Last paragraph. The changing face of Japan. Though it had many open worlds over the years, the most prominent in the Yakuza series is Kamurocho, based on Tokyo's Kabukicho red light district. The series takes place in the modern day, meaning if you play the first game, the world will look drastically different than the most recent, as it's changed to reflect recent times, which is an immense amount of work. But one Yakuza series art director, Nobunoki Mitake, says it's worth it. All right, blasting through. I never played the Yakuza games. All right, Natural. All these members here have been doing this same job together for over 10 years. Yokoyama says about the team around him. We knew that one day a split would come and somebody would end up leaving and doing something else. I think that's a natural thing. This is when the first split happens. At some point in the future, it might happen again. Someone else might leave and do something else they want to do. He reiterates one more time, things naturally come about. Okay, holiday buying guide. Some kind of Masters of the Universe. Is that Lego? Looks like Lego. Jurassic World. Yeah, Snake Mountain. T-Rex. $50. $321 on the Masters of the Universe. Lego Atari 2600. $239. Kicking it old school. 4 Nerf Gelfire Mythic Full Auto Blaster. Okay, got a full banana. Luke Skywalker milestone statue. Thing half scale bust, $200. Five Nights at Freddy's Funkos, $9. Funkos getting that backlash nowadays for being too popular. PlayStation taped ladies cropped hoodie, 57. Arcade 1-Up, Marvel vs. Capcom. Memories, $5.99. One Piece straw hat, throw blanket, $40. World of Warcraft Return to the Dragon Isles art print, $150. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, out now. SNES console ornament, $20. A lot of stuff. Keycaps, yeah, 2 drop, and Lord of the Rings Elvis keyboard, $179. Wild streaming pack for gamers looking for a higher level of control over their game audio, microphone outputs, and audio levels. Yamaha has put together a handy pack that includes easy to use gaming mixer and excellent headset. Both are available separately for a lower price. The mixer lets you play the mic settings and effects like reverb, radio voice, and pitch, along with fine-tuning game audio and chat. Meanwhile, the included YHGO1 is comfortable, light, and built around the stellar soft sound production of Yamaha's long years in the field. An excellent condenser mic picks up voice and accuracy while keeping background noise to an absolute minimum. Perhaps most importantly, the combined set is much easier to set up and run than many other market mixers. Setting up relative newcomers for success, $4.19. All right, that's interesting. Poly Studio P5 webcam. PlayStation 5 camouflage console cover. More stuff. A lot of stuff for you to buy. My father's work, I played that. That was pretty nice. Got the app implementation into the game. Box Monster, have not heard of that. This simple kids strategy game, yeah, we'll skip it. And since it includes the box into the game, let's read it. This simple kid targeted game mixes manual dexterity and complex shape recognition. A wild-eyed monster lives with you, and it eats whatever it can get its mouth around, including all sorts of stuff in your house. Those uniquely shaped objects and cardboard pieces that sit inside the actual game box, and up to 4 questing hands can reach through the holes in the side to pull out specific combinations without being able to see them, and fix the poor guy's upset stomach. Silly, quick playing, and likely to induce significant giggling, this cooperative game should be a hit to entertain even the shortest attention spans. Lord knows kids have short attention spans. But, I mean, that's a pretty good idea, digging a box game. All right, Twilight Inscription, $65. Didn't know it was that much. Pokemon Sword and Shield Lost Origin, $4 packs. Star Wars The Clone Wars, I think that's that Pandemic. Yeah, the Pandemic gaming system has increasingly shown its flexibility to provide exciting cooperative experiences regardless of the theme. That's proven again with this take on the Clone Wars as they fought. Yeah, Pandemic, Clone Wars. Origins game table, $2,700 game table, crazy. And D&D Icons of the Realms Tarrasque, $400. All right, returning to round 1. As players look forward to the next stage of Street Fighter, we look back at 35 years of the fabled fighting franchise. All right, if you walked into arcades in the 90s, it undoubtedly had a Street Fighter II cabinet. If you went at the right time, you probably even saw a crowd gathered around it. In one of the most profitable games in arcade history, Street Fighter II drew more than its fair share of quarters and tokens during the arcade heyday, but the franchise transcends that one moment in time. To say that Street Fighter has sparked multiple revolutions in its genre throughout its history is not far-fetched. Arcades aren't omnipresent the way they once were. Well, in Japan, I think they still are. But the Street Fighter name has endured the ever-shifting grounds of the games industry. The fierce fistfights made the leap from the mall game rooms to the living room, the internet, and even tournaments broadcast to massive international audiences. As the franchise turns 35 years old, we met with the people involved to understand the series' origins and how it remains relevant 3.5 decades later. All right, yeah, I was kind of half looking at this. No wonder it looks weird. It's Street Fighter 1. All right, here comes a new challenger. You'd be forgiven if you've never played the original Street Fighter. Even by the late 80s standards, it wasn't particularly remarkable outside of its concept. But you know what it's good for? being in Juice with Samuel L. Jackson and Tupac. Why was Street Fighter 1 in Juice? I don't know. But that initial game laid the all-important groundwork for the franchise and genre. Bored in a long meeting with Capcom's sales team, designer Takashi Nishiyama caught himself daydreaming. As the meeting stretched to the near 2-hour mark, he was struck by inspiration. As he recalled to Polygon in 2020, Nishiyama began sketching the idea on a piece of paper, inspired by the one-on-one boss battles in the 1984 beat-em-up game Kung Fu Master, which he also worked on, as well as Bruce Lee's 1972 film Game of Death. Nishiyama jotted down the basic concept of two characters facing off in a one-on-one combat. Once he had it on paper, he showed it to producer Yoshiki Okamoto, sitting next to him in the meeting. Okamoto thought the idea looked interesting, so Nishiyama created a design document out of the concept and he presented it to the higher-ups, including planner Hiroshi Matsumoto. Once Capcom greenlit the project, Nishiyama and Matsumoto worked together to flesh out the idea. Pulling from their interest in martial arts, Matsumoto and Nishiyama immediately started brainstorming about the kinds of fighters and moves they should put in the game. While the game universe today includes several colorful characters with distinct fighting styles, initially players could only control Ryu, representing Japan, and Ken representing the US. Ryu and Ken handled identically to one another, possessing the same attributes, moves, and techniques. This allowed for completely balanced one-on-one competitive combat against another player, but more importantly, it let the team remain on budget and schedule. When Street Fighter arrived in arcades across the globe in 1987, Capcom shipped two distinct cabinets. The first cabinet carries the now standard 6-button configuration, with each button representing different power level for kick or punch. The second, known as the Deluxe cabinet, replaces 6 buttons with 2 pressure-sensitive pads, one for punches and another for kicks. On that arcade machine, Ryu and Ken threw their attacks based on how hard players hit these pads. As you might imagine, these Deluxe cabinets weren't long for this world. They essentially encouraged players to damage the machine and were replaced mainly by the more popular 6-button configuration. While the first Street Fighter is worth revisiting today solely as a historical curiosity, that nascent gameplay style and stiff as bare bones as it was aptly laid the groundwork for what was to come next. With the sequel given the go-ahead by Capcom, the developers of the Street Fighter began working on the game that would change the world forever. Round 2, fight. Following the commercial success of 1989's Final Fight in the US, Capcom decided to focus development efforts on games in the fighting genre. Part of that involved developing a sequel to Street Fighter. Both Nishiyama and Matsumoto left Capcom shortly after the launching of the first game, so Capcom tapped the man. We're gonna skip around a little bit. That kind of art. You got Dalsim, Yoga Fire, showing how far the jumps will go up. Pretty cool. Ducking, plotting out the moves. Cool. See the guys. All right, the first game, Capcom implemented easier to execute commands for special moves, smoother animations and gameplay, and all new combo system. In a 2002 interview with Edge, producer Noritaka Funamizu says he accidentally discovered the combo system as a glitch while playtesting. He noticed that he could string together multiple attacks in a cohesive manner if the strikes were timed right. As Funamizu notes in an interview, this system became a massive part of the franchise. Discovering another major innovation required much less skill and investigation. In fact, it might be the first thing you notice about Street Fighter 2. The roster of playable characters Ryu and Ken remained on the roster, but aside from the boss character Sagat carrying forward, the game featured an all-new cast of unique fighters Chun-Li, Guile, Blanca, Dhalsim, Zangief, E Honda joined Ryu and Ken as playable fighters, while the final challenge of the arcade mode featured a gauntlet against non-playable characters. Balrog, known as Boxer in the international tournaments. Yeah, and Vega, known as Claw, Sagat, and M Bison, known as the Dictator. And really fun fact, M Bison is really Mike Tyson, but everybody would have known it was Mike Tyson, so they gave Balrog just his other name, and then they gave M Bison the name to M Bison. Crazy. Once word of Street Fighter 2 got out to the other Capcom teams, the game became a hot topic publisher wide, hinting to the Street Fighter 2 team that it was on to something. Even the developers from the other non-Street Fighter titles would come and play for fun, Okano says. We saw the excitement and we knew we had something going for us. Skipping last paragraph here. Street Fighter 2 remains one of the most beloved video games of all time, and the accolades and record profits and community support made it one of the most successful games ever released. Though it was a tough and unprecedented act to follow, Capcom subverted expectations in the succeeding years. Okay, Unfamiliar Streets. Rather than immediately jumping into a numbered sequel of Street Fighter II, Capcom took a detour through the early years of the story. Set after the events of Street Fighter, but before Street Fighter II, the Alpha series featured younger versions of many fan favorites. This placement in the timeline allowed Capcom to use characters from the rosters of Street Fighter II, and even the Final Fight series. Cody. The Alpha trilogy, launching in 95, 96, and 98, introduced a now beloved characters like Sakura, R, Mika, Rose, Dan, and Charlie, as well as mechanics like the gauge-based super combo system. Street Fighter Alpha 3 proved to be the fitting send-off for the sub-series, improving the super combo system through a selectable ism mechanic that gave players a choice on how to engage with their gauges. Alpha 3 also included an enormous roster that ranged from 28 to 38 characters, depending on which version you played, in a world tour mode, enabling character customization and more fleshed out story lines. On the heels of the Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia led Street Fighter theatrical film, Capcom released Street Fighter the movie video game. While still a 2D fighting game, the character models use digitized images of many of the actors, including Van Damme. Despite the star power and trendy graphical styles, critics and fans largely panned the game. Trying to keep up with Mortal Kombat. You can't keep up with Mortal Kombat. And around the same time, Capcom worked with Eureka, a development studio founded by Street Fighter II designer Akira Nishitani, to create a trilogy of Street Fighter EX games. These titles ditched the sprite-based characters of previous games in favor of polygonal graphics. Though it features 3D visuals, the EX games still play like 2D games, and it's an officially licensed Street Fighter trilogy. But the spin-off series focuses heavily on characters exclusive to the EX games, with only 5 Street Fighter II characters crossing over. Though the visuals were revolutionary then, the gameplay and lack of recognizable cast made for largely forgotten spin-off series. Capcom hasn't revisited since EX3 launched in 2000. However, the EX titles did give the series at least one gift: canceling. By canceling out one move and into another, players could string together massive combos. During that period, Street Fighter characters began appearing in crossover titles following Capcom releases of X-Men, Children of the Atom, and Marvel Superheroes. Capcom made the most popular Street Fighter characters in the era most popular Marvel characters together for the X-Men vs. Street Fighter. This entry, which first hit arcades in 1996, adapted the 2D fighting style of Street Fighter, but amped up the action and enabled tag team style fighting teams of 2 characters. Less than a year later, the roster was expanded in a 1997 sequel, Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter. Then expanded again in 98 with Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. The Marvel vs. Capcom franchise spawned 4 mainline entries and remains one of Capcom's most popular fighting game franchises, with the Street Fighter characters featuring prominently on the rosters. However, Street Fighter 2 characters have continued crossing over with prominent franchises and companies including Tekken, Tatsunoko, SNK, Super Smash Bros., and Power Rangers. Though the success of these crossovers has been a boon for both Capcom and the Street Fighter fans, nothing quite matches the excitement surrounding a new mainline Street Fighter title, striking while the iron is hot. While all these spin-offs and pseudo-sequels were being developed and released to critical and commercial acclaim, the community was still hungry for a true sequel to Street Fighter 2. In 95, in the middle of releasing the Alpha and EX trilogies, Capcom began the development of a new mainline entry into the series. In 1997, it launched Street Fighter 3 New Generation. The title was apt as Capcom moved away from the iconic roster of characters of the Street Fighter 2 and Alpha, only carrying forward Ryu and Ken. The same year, Capcom released Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, which expanded the roster with new characters and reintroduced fan favorite Akuma. Finally, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike launched in 1999, bringing more new characters, Chun-Li, and a grading system to tell winning players how well they fought. Street Fighter 3 is also noteworthy for introducing parrying, rewarding players for taking the risk of pressing forward into an oncoming attack instead of standard retreating block many were accustomed to. The parry system complemented the new Alpha-inspired gauge-based super arts and EX, I don't even really know, X-inspired canceling to create what is perhaps the most perfectly paced and precision-based fighting system ever seen. While highly flawed in the first game, New Generations, the parry system was perfected by the Third Strike, the third iteration of Street Fighter 3. Esports commentator James Chen says, and honestly, it's story of going from basically a flop in the US to becoming one of the most beloved fighting games of all time here in the States in a long journey. The parry mechanic remains as one of the most beloved and player satisfying mechanics ever created. Though Street Fighter 3 didn't revolutionize fighting games like its numbered predecessor, it perfected the formula, but it was a gem fans didn't fully appreciate in its time. However, even as competing fighting game franchises flourished under the new trend of 3D visuals and fight planes, the Street Fighter franchise entered the largest lull of its history, and fans didn't receive a new Street Fighter game for 8 years. All right, the leaderboard. Return to form. Street Fighter relinquished its claim to the throne in the early years of the new millennium, with more players looking to enjoy a 3D experience. Franchises like Tekken, Dead or Alive stepped into the spotlight, even Street Fighter's closest rival, Mortal Kombat, transitioned to 3D fighters. Despite the X spin-off series' use of 3D graphics, Street Fighter always remained steadfast in its 2D action. The final X entry landed on PlayStation 2 in 2000, giving fans nothing more than re-releases of Street Fighter 2 and 3 on modern consoles in the succeeding years. People basically had forgotten about the genre, Chen says. While some franchises like Tekken and Guilty Gear continued to create quality games, other franchises like Street Fighter disappeared, and Mortal Kombat had its notorious run of awful games during that period. Basically, the US fighting games were a thing of the past. However, as all of its rivals trailblazed 3D frontiers, Yoshinori Ono, whose work with Capcom stretched back to the early 90s, noticed how many people clamored for a new mainline entry. Based on the reception of Street Fighter 2 on Xbox Live Arcade, he petitioned Capcom's Kenji Inafune to allow the team to create a new mainline game inspired by Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Ono, who had previously worked as a sound producer on the Alpha game, stepped into the producer role as he tried to bring the series back to its roots. The result was Street Fighter 4, a game that used modern visuals and embellished 3D character models with ink-based flourishes instead of sprites. The team maintained the tight, responsive 2D fighting action that made Street Fighter so popular in the first place by implementing 2D hitboxes over the 3D character models. Street Fighter landed in arcades in 2008, with home releases arriving less than a year later. The fourth mainline entry was a rousing success with fans and critics. By combining the classic gameplay and characters with beautiful visuals and new conventions, Street Fighter 4 quickly became a modern classic and again ushered in a new era for the fighting genre. Though 3D games dominated the 2000s, the subsequent decade proved the importance of Street Fighter 4's demonstration that enthusiasm still existed for the 2D segment. In the following years, several franchises, both new and old, embraced the 2D style once more, kicking off a renaissance for the genre. All right, skipping on to the end. Yeah, seeing Future Fights. The last of Street Fighter V's many DLC characters like Sullivan represented the road ahead for the series. Street Fighter 6 was in development during the tail end of Street Fighter 5, and rather than Luke being the final new character of Street Fighter 5, we saw him as kind of a guest character coming from the future, Nakayama says. At the time, we didn't announce Street Fighter 6 yet, so we didn't have the clear context behind who Luke is. It's a bit nerve-wracking. We wanted to make sure that we presented him under the correct light, and we were really excited by the very cautious about that. Luke utilizes tactics he learned in the military employ a specialized MMA style, but more importantly, he steps into the spotlight as the main protagonist for the next mainline game. That game is Street Fighter 6, which introduces loads of improvements, character mechanics, and features into the formula. This revolutionary next step in the series launches in 2023, 7 years after Street Fighter V first arrived. To learn more about how Capcom is hoping to once again revolutionize the fighting game genre, continue and read on to the cover story, Street Fighter 6, page 42. I thought that was the cover story. Oh my gosh. All right, 37 minutes in. How Capcom is bringing a game that is simultaneously fresh and familiar with Street Fighter 6, The Dawn of a New Era by Brian Shea. Each mainline entry of the Street Fighter series is an important milestone in the fighting game genre, though every numbered entry received critical acclaim. Street Fighter V sticks out among fans as the outlier of the series. The game, but out of the trouble emerged something great. Thanks to the team's persistence, post-launch roadmap, and the injection of new blood into the project leadership, Street Fighter V drastically improved its core gameplay, online play, content offerings, and more throughout its 6-year lifespan. With the benefit of those lessons learned, many team members that righted the ship are back to develop Street Fighter 6. The latest entry delivers a myriad of improvements, new features, and a slick new aesthetic, while simultaneously acknowledging and paying homage to each entry before it. Street Fighter 6 feels like yet another evolution of the fighting game genre ushered in by the franchise that pioneered it in the first place. We've already spent hours playing Street Fighter 6 thanks to an October closed beta in several summer trade expos like Summer Game Fest and Tokyo Game Show, but we wanted to learn more. We traveled to Capcom's headquarters in Osaka, Japan to get more hands-on time and learn the inside story of Street Fighter 6 from the passionate team making it. A returning combo. In 2018, Capcom began thinking about what it wanted to do for the next Street Fighter DLC. Plans on Street Fighter V were cut short, but the title was experiencing a resurgence thanks to post-launch updates and fixes. Two of the prominent figureheads of that turnaround, director Takayuki Nakayama and producer Shuhei Matsumoto, were placed in the same roles for Street Fighter 6, with much of the old guard, including Street Fighter V figurehead Yoshinoro Ono, read more on page 32, no longer involved in the franchise. The series was at a crossroads. Just as this shift in Street Fighter V upended Capcom's fighting game department team, Street Fighter 6 ushers in an entirely new era for the franchise. Nakayama and Matsumoto brought solely needed fresh perspectives to the table, energizing the development team in the process. All right, skip to the last paragraph here. Thanks to the backing of Capcom leadership, the Street Fighter 6 development team has been able to capitalize and create something it feels is extraordinary, even in the context of one context of one of the most beloved series in video games. With a new era of developers ready to usher in the new generation of Street Fighter, the 6 mainline entry gives fans something that feels like a 360-degree view of the franchise, something that pulls from those previous games while also giving the players something wholly fresh and modern. Street Fighter 6 is ambitious, but through strong gameplay and seemingly realized vision, is poised to deliver on those promises. Okay, Drive to Survive. Street Fighter 6 pulls from individual entries of the series to create its fighting style, but at its core, the gameplay feels like a culmination of the series to this point. Players still have access to light, medium, and heavy attacks of past games, as well as throws and special moves that require specific inputs to pull off. Throwing a Hadouken and Shoryuken feels as good as it did in the 90s. One of those core mechanics, Street Fighter 6 also adds a new drive system, which operates a meter featuring 6 segments. This drive meter is similar to the stamina system, as each drive move you pull off depletes segments of your constantly recharging supply. And in addition to preventing players from spamming the powerful drive moves and requiring them to think strategically, this also lets fights get off to action-packed start, since you begin with your 6 bars fully charged. And in comparison to Street Fighter V, the intention with the V trigger system was we wanted to have strong options towards the latter half of the match. Nakayama says we wanted to go a different route for 6, having all the excitement and freedom from the very beginning of the fight. Since these drive bars allow access to different styles of moves, it plays into one of the development team's main goals, giving players the freedom to play how they want. Players can use each of those meter segments as they need. For example, the defensive drive parry lets you deflect incoming attacks if timed right. At the same time, drive rush enables you to run forward out of an attack or parry for one more combo opportunities. Meanwhile, those who want to go on the offensive can activate drive impact, which explodes with a splash of paint and can continue through an opponent's attack. The suite rounds out with the overdrives, powerful variants of special moves like EX moves in past games. Even with minimal drive systems experience, I use it to great effect. Though drive parry feels like it will have the wildest utility in disrupting my opponent's attack flow, the highlights of my matches involved pulling off powerful overdrive moves just as my opponent thought they were getting in the upper hand. With how effective this system was for me in the short time I experimented with it, I can't wait to fully explore just how impactful it is once I come closer to mastering its intricacies. One of the things we felt that was important to do was to make the actual moves associated with this system relatively easy to perform. Nakayama says that's something we prioritized. All right, skipping around. One of the primary goals of Street Fighter 6 is to make the title something everyone, regardless of ability, can enjoy. While the drive system isn't approachable as new mechanics come into the series, Nakayama and his team came up with one way to ensure the most expansive collection of players could have fun with Street Fighter 6 different control types. The developers created 3 distinct control options, each catering to a different audience. Classic controls give you the most traditional gameplay, while modern controls remap and simplify gameplay. While modern controls, throws, specials, moves, drive parry, and drive impact are mapped out to single buttons and triggers, with buttons for kicks and punches replaced with single buttons for agnostic light, medium, and heavy attacks. The point of modern controls wasn't to deliver an easy mode, but rather to give those less familiar with fighting games another option to jump into the fun while still requiring skill. We have to consider that this series has been going for 30 years now, and someone who's been playing the games for 35 years might know a little more than someone who's never touched a Street Fighter game, Nakayama says. Modern controls work across all game modes, which raises concerns about competitive integrity. After all, how would 2 equally matched players stack up if one uses a simplified control scheme? Currently, the team is exploring options like making modern control specials weaker, so players are encouraged to use the inputs or making it so it doesn't allow you to select between low, medium, and high of the special move. But since classic controls already offer more precision in selecting your attacks, the team isn't overly concerned with the competitive imbalance. All right, skipping around. Return of the World Warriors. As Capcom looked out at the roster of characters it wanted to include in Street Fighter VI, it pulled from a selection of classic fighters and new faces. Debuting characters like Luke, Jamie, and Kimberly offer unique personalities and fighting styles that we haven't seen in past games. Yeah, I think Kimberly, she might be one of the new ones. She's something. She's a sex pot. But meanwhile, Street Fighter 2 icons like Ryu, Gao, Chun-Li, Dhalsim, and Blanca are all slated to return, each sporting a new look to reflect their older stature during the latest point in the Street Fighter timeline. Maybe the most significant departure from his classic style is Ken, who serves as a central character, though not the protagonist. In Street Fighter VI's story, as one of the two original playable characters in the series alongside Ryu, fans have seen his complete evolution from Ryu's rival to husband of Eliza, father of Mel, and ex-vice president of the Masters Foundation. Street Fighter VI ushers in a new chapter for the iconic combatant. Yeah, skipping around. Okay, it's a splashy color. In a lockstep with Capcom's mission to create something widely appealing, Street Fighter VI's art style is downright striking. The style takes various inspirations from street culture, which art director Konami Fujioka feels is the natural progression of the themes in the game, stretching as far back as Street Fighter 1 and 2. We understood that it matched the overall theme for the series, so we put in the effort to make sure the relevancy and to make it look as strongly within Street Fighter 6 as well. Besides the street culture and hip-hop aesthetic, another thing that we were inspired by and referred to a lot is with the design aesthetics was real-life sport and real-life fighting events, whether it be MMA or pro wrestling. The fight sport influence is perhaps most on display through the walkout cutscenes and where the characters enter the arena together before the fight. The characters each have distinct animations that play into their personalities, such as Ryu remaining focused and stoic, or Juri taunting her opponent every step of the way. All right, World Tour offers unique experience that lets you explore an open area as your custom avatar. Here you experience the story while also learning the ropes of Street Fighter 6. Nakayama teases that while learning the techniques of your favorite fighters is rewarding, the extra lore drops will also appease longtime fans. All right, from the sidelines, Battle Hub plays into a sentiment that permeated nearly every part of my conversations with the development team. Capcom understands people love watching Street Fighter. That's why it created a specific color language in its drive system to let players know what is happening. For example, Drive Parry has a blue color scheme, Drive Rush has a green aura, and Drive Impact slashes the screen with character-specific colors. We want to make it easier to tell from a player's perspective. But beyond that, even if you're not playing and you're just kind of watching, we wanted to emphasize those points for viewers so they know what's happening based on what they see in the game color-wise. Art director Konami Fujioka says, the answer lies in the heart of the battle. There's a saying in MMA adapted from a famous Nelson Mandela quote: you either win or you learn. Street Fighter V may not have been the win Capcom was looking for when it initially launched, but by listening to fans, extracting the right lessons, and course correcting, the developer appears ready to deliver the next truly great entry into the legendary fighting game franchise. Skipping the last paragraph. With the likelihood of starting in a much better position than its now well-liked predecessor, and the potential benefit of post-launch evolution, the sky's the limit for Street Fighter VI. We won't know how Street Fighter VI will turn out until next year, when the game launches. But for now, the franchise's future looks as bright as its past. Cool pixel art TVs back there. Pretty great background. All right, Hidden Treasures by Matt Miller. How a fantasy game called Chia is welcoming players to a real place called New Caledonia. The propellers spin down and I step off the puddle jumper plane onto the tarmac of the tiniest airport I've ever visited. Instantly, I'm overcome by the scent of greenery, lush and human, with a hint of maybe mint. Jungle surrounds this strip of paved runway in every direction, and I'm here, of all things, to see a video game. All right, last paragraph here. You wouldn't call Lifu heavily developed, while the native people don't appear to be living affluently. There's a clear sense of community, interconnection, and shared joy in living intimately within a bountiful nature while relying on one another. All right, last paragraph. That sense of harmonious reciprocity extends into the game's most prominent supernatural mechanic, soul jumping. Chia can transfer her consciousness into animals and objects around her, from rocks to birds, and have brief periods where she perceives the world through their eyes and acts as they do, enabling new forms of locomotion, exploration, and discovery. Like pretty much everything we design in the game, we cross-reference it to cultural stuff like from New Caledonia, Crefo says. A lot of local folklore is about shape-shifting, like animals and people taking the forms of trees, rocks, snakes, and things like that. So first and foremost, it was a gameplay mechanic, but it shaped the culture. But it was shaped by the culture. Last paragraph again. Dig those locales. All right, last paragraph. Minions of Mavora, the big bad of the game, are weirdly animated strips of cloth called Mono. They gather in small camps like Bokoblin gatherings in Breath of the Wild. Clever power manipulation can take them out, like soul jumping into an oil lamp and setting them alight. It's a flash of combat excitement in an otherwise respectfully peaceful playthrough. Cool. All right, last paragraph here. As the evening wears on and the music and drinks make everything a bit hazy, my mind shifts back to the memory of the girls at the cultural hall, clustered together, fascinated by the video games lead that looks like them on the big screen. It's an enduring image that sticks with me on the long flight home over subsequent days. There's something special about this little game from a little studio about a little girl on a big adventure. It has something to do with those kids saw on that screen and how they recognize something real in fantasy. It also has something to do with the developer creating their own fantasy by looking back at their childhood and finding something equally real to add to the mix. Okay. All right. Previews. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Since its announcement at E3 2019, we've been waiting for the veil to lift on the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, itching to dive back into that beautiful rendition of Hyrule. Thanks to the recent trailer, we not only know that we'll be finally doing that, but also the sequel's official title. While The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom sounds innocuous enough and even holds a certain poetic symmetry with Breath of the Wild, it may divulge more about the story. In 2021, Nintendo's vice president and product and player experience, Bill Trinen, told IGN the company was playing its cards close to the vest to avoid giving hints about where the story may go. While the subtitle Tears of the Kingdom doesn't immediately bring anything to mind, diving into the imagery and visual cues we've seen since the very first tease offers up some potential clues about the trajectory of Link and Zelda's next adventure. In the 2019 reveal trailer, we witnessed the duo exploring a cavern with ancient events painted and chiseled into the walls. Malice, the same corrupting force that enabled Ganon to conquer Hyrule before the Breath of the Wild, pours out from under the dried-out corpse seemingly held in place by its magical spell. As the duo arrives at the corpse, it appears that the body belongs to the evil Gerudo King himself, Ganondorf. At the end of the trailer, we see the body reanimate and come back to life, and Hyrule Castle lifts itself into the sky, but the details are dicey at best. In the next trailer, which arrived 2 years later at E3 2021, we received a clearer picture of how those events unfolded. As the malice rapidly spreads through the cavern and body springs back to life, it knocks the footing out from under Link and Zelda, and the Princess of Hyrule plummets into a pit. The malice consumes Link's right arm and appears to have damage in subsequent shots, but he spared the fall Zelda endured by the same hand that was once held Ganondorf's corpse in place. The trailer then leaps ahead to show Link skydiving, arms outstretched, much like 2011's Skyward Sword. Last paragraph. There are other ways Skyward Sword themes might intersect with those of Tears of the Kingdom, such as the Master Sword. It's broken in the trailers for this new game, whereas a part of Skyward Sword's story revolves around the creation of the Master Sword. But we'll need to wait until the game's release to see how much crossover there is. Thankfully, along with the official name, Nintendo gave us a release date of May 12th, 2023. We don't have much longer to wait before diving back into Hyrule to uncover a new series of mysteries en route to forging a new legend in the illustrious series. And I still will have not beaten the Breath of the Wild by then, I'm sure. Alright, Rise of the Ronin. Not content with only launching Wo Long Fallen Dynasty early next year, Team Ninja has another action game in the works called Rise of the Ronin. This PlayStation 5 console exclusive won't release until 2024, but our first look into this historical epic has already seized our attention. Rise of the Ronin unfolds in 1863 Japan during the final years of a 3 centuries long Edo period. This tumultuous transition period, known as Bakumatsu, saw the nation overthrow its long-standing militaristic government and adopt the modernized empire of today due to civil unrest and increasing Western influences. Players explore this chaotic era as a nameless Ronin, a samurai without a master. While the story is steeped in history, Team Ninja has not revealed specific plot details yet. Skipping 2 paragraphs, Team Ninja describes Rise of the Ronin as its most ambitious and challenging project yet. The team is harnessing years of expertise in the action department while also crafting a world comparable to Sony's Ghost of Tsushima. Yeah, something like that. Moreover, Team Ninja wants to tackle this historic period in a manner that does justice while crafting a compelling story and characters. We won't see the fruits of this labor for some time, but this first taste has us salivating for more. Looks like Onimusha to me. Wild Hearts, more than another Monster Hunter. In Wild Hearts, you play as a hunter tasked with defeating the land of Azuma from Kimono, once peaceful beasts that have become chaotic monsters. While the game takes clear inspiration from Capcom's Monster Hunter series, it does plenty to set itself apart with explorable open world areas, seamless 3-player online co-op, and fast-paced magical crafting system. Wild Hearts is shaping up to be massive as the monsters you'll be fighting. Last paragraph. I'm excited about the different ways I can combine weapons with different Karakuri constructs and explore the distinct hunting grounds with a group of friends. Luckily, I won't have to wait long. Wild Hearts releases in early 2023. Alright, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Going into my hands-on time with Pokemon Scarlet, I explored some changes based on Game Freak's embrace of open-world gameplay and a do-what-you-want mentality with its 3 primary story paths. Pokemon has yet to make the massive generational shift I've dreamed of for years and has instead opted for half steps with these new entry. Scarlet isn't that transformational change, but it's significantly more than a small iteration. In fact, it may be the series' biggest to date. I explored a small portion of the Scarlet map for an hour and was surprised by the amount of available ground to cover. 3 objective markers appear across a valley and a desert area, each representing one of the 3 main story paths: the Victory Road, the Standard, and the 8 Gem storyline seen throughout the series. The Path of Legends, which consists of tracking down Titan Pokemon in Starfall Street, a unique take on the Team Rocket-esque plotline found in every mainline entry. I set off toward the Path of Legends marker and did not stop, and did so atop Koraidon, the legendary Pokemon adorning the Scarlet box. It's immediately clear how much Legends Arceus informs the generation of Pokemon, because like Arceus' various helpful Pokemon, Koraidon can glide through the air, swim across lakes and oceans, and climb up cliffs. You can also ride Koraidon anywhere. Everything feels faster as a result, including the seamlessness of the open world. While roaming the area, I see the aggressive Lechonk holding his ground, threatening a battle. If I get closer, I capture a special Sphinx that glistens from a distance, indicating it has a rare Terra type. I see a small horde of Sphinx elsewhere and Magikarp swimming in the ocean. All right, last paragraph. Take the last paragraph. I left my Pokemon Scarlet preview excited about the 9th generation of a series I've had with me my entire life. Sword and Shield left me wanting a lot more, especially as the first big mainline entry on Switch. Scarlet and Violet art flipping the formula on its head, but there are enough changes that I'd call this the biggest generation transformation in years. The open world aspects of the games are refreshing, adding more personality and seamlessness to the series than ever before. The ability to tackle the 3 primary story paths at any given time seems fun, but I wasn't able to test its limits, something I look forward to during the final game. And nonetheless, the improved visuals and boundless design of Scarlet's world has me excited to experience the Paldean journey, even if I'm left wanting more in other aspects. All right, sounds good. All right, Like a Dragon, Ishin. In 2017, Yakuza 0 catapulted the series' Western popularity and visibility to new heights. The well-received title took the long-running franchise from cult favorite to global mainstream success, and subsequent entries and spin-offs like Judgment have further raised developer Ryu Gatoku's global profile. This new demand and the popularity of historical games like Ghost of Tsushima inspired RGG to dig into its portfolio and remake its Japan exclusive spinoff, Like a Dragon Ishin, for a wider audience. Last paragraph. Like a Dragon Ishin sports improved graphical presentation and additional content, meaning fans who play the original won't be getting the same game again. I'm impressed with what I've played so far, and I'm glad the series is popular enough to justify localizing its intriguing spinoff. Cool. The Theater Rhythm Final Barline. Final Fantasy's take on the rhythm genre is back in Theater Rhythm Final Barline, releasing this February on PS4 and Switch. The first Theater Rhythm was released in 2014 on the 3DS, and since then they have been plenty of new Final Fantasy songs to add to the series, including tracks from Final Fantasy 15, 14, and 7 remake, all of which make appearances in Final Bar Line. For the uninitiated, Theater Bar Line was a unique take on the rhythm genre that required stylish swipes and taps on the 3DS touchscreen, making it more involved than simpler titles that require just button pressing. Last paragraph. If one of your favorite parts of the Final Fantasy series is its music, Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line is a game you'll want to keep your eye on. Even if you're not familiar with the series, this might convince you to check out the famed franchise. Like a Dragon 8, didn't we just read that? All right, Like a Dragon 8 isn't out until 2024, but RGG Studio had plenty of other announcements to keep you busy. Like a Dragon, Ishin, page 66, a remake of the, didn't we just read it? Wolong Fallen Dynasty. You'd be forgiven for mistaking Wolong Fallen Dynasty for a longer titled Nioh 3. The two games share many similarities: fast-paced melee combat, steep difficulty, loot collecting, and plenty of supernatural abilities and adversaries. But where Nioh focused on Japanese swordplay, Wolong centers around Chinese martial arts and history. With two Nioh games and years of action expertise, Team Ninja wants Wolong to be the sharpest title yet. It also may be its darkest, and the studio wants to tell a bloodier take on the Chinese fantasy and martial arts as opposed to a more whimsical, high-flying wuxia style many Westerners associate with the premise. We have plenty to look forward to when Wolong Fallen Dynasty arrives on March 3rd, 2023. Alright, Tekken 8. Tekken 8 cinematic reveal trailer offered a jaw-dropping first look at the improved graphical fidelity for the next King of Iron Fist tournament. Featuring remodeled realistic characters and dynamic background effects, Tekken 8 is a visual treat so far. Story-wise, the game focuses on a father and son feud between Kazuya and Jin. Isn't Kazuya dead? There's a YouTube video telling you the history of Tekken. It's pretty crazy. All right. Rose and Camellia. As the widow and deceased noble, you must claim your inheritance by literally slapping your family members into submission. Rose and Camelia's humorous punch-out style slap duels test your reflexes as you read enemy signals to dodge slaps, then retaliate with your own. Originally a Japanese flash game and available on mobile, it now makes its way to Switch. Slap the schmutz out their chest. Slaps. Man, that looks funny. Need for Speed Unbound. Need for Speed Unbound is the return of the street races and police chases, this time with a visual twist. Characters have a cel-shaded art style and cards with customizable graffiti effects, animating dust clouds and tire tracks. With 143 cars to choose from and an emphasis on street art and fashion, Need for Speed puts style in the driver's seat. Looks like A$AP Rocky. Is that A$AP Rocky? Where's the baby? I don't know. IB. IB is a fascinating and unsettling psychological horror game about exploring an art gallery where nothing is as it seems. Interacting with artwork leads to supernatural occurrences, creating unique environmental puzzles. First released in 2012 as freeware, the Switch version offers improved visuals, new puzzles, and quality of life updates. Dead Space. Dead Space is back, and it certainly looks like Dead Space, which isn't a bad thing, but it sure is a gross thing. We recently got our first glimpse of gameplay at the updated visuals. Look great, but it also means that every gory finisher and dismembered limb looks far nastier than it ever did in 2008. Try not to feel sick to your stomach when it comes out in January 2023. Fire Emblem Engage. Intelligent Systems is back with Fire Emblem Engage, a new turn-based tactical RPG coming to Switch in a few months. This time the studio brings some fan-favorite characters back into the mix like Marth and Lucina. They'll fight alongside a new red and blue-haired hero known as the Divine Dragon to help seal the ancient fell dragon away. Mega Man Battle System Legacy Collection. Mega Man Land and the gang are back with a remastered bundle of 10 games divided between the first 6 Battle Network titles. Besides giving fans a modern method of enjoying those Game Boy Advance gems, Legacy Collection packs in artwork, a musical player, and high-res filter. A 3D avatar of Mega Man himself even guides menu selection for a nice touch. It's a me, a Mario. Yeah, I'm watching a YouTube the complete story of Mega Man right now. It's like 8 hours long. It's wild and crazy, kids. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. From the minds behind the Friday the 13th, the game, comes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a new 7-player asymmetrical multiplayer base game based on the movie franchise of the same name. 4 survivors will face off against 3 killers, including horror icon Leatherface, to escape a dreadful location using special abilities and unique playstyles to survive. Survival horror. All right, Overwatch 2 got a 9 of 10. All right, Overwatch 2 took the gaming world. Overwatch took the gaming world by storm back in 2016, thanks to its well-balanced roster of unique heroes and terrific objective-based first-person shooting gameplay. The game's popularity endured through years due to a wealth of new content like characters, maps, cosmetics, and game modes, adding to the terrific foundation. However, once the content dried up, the public interest followed shortly afterward. Overwatch 2 represents the reemergence of one of the top multiplayer games of the last generation, delivering a 5v5 format, a free-to-play structure, and a ton of new content. The result is an action-packed and enjoyable progression of the beloved hero shooter franchise, but one that feels less revolutionary and more iterative than expected. Last paragraph. Overwatch 2 doesn't flip the formula the way you might expect a long-awaited number sequel, but through its various clever tweaks, it's a well-rounded evolution I've poured more than 1,000 hours into since 2016. I may never recreate the magic of those first few years in Overwatch, but Overwatch 2 is a big step towards restoring the faith in the franchise and has me thinking it's time to pour a few more 100 hours into my favorite team-based shooter. Bayonetta 3, 8.25. The Bayonetta series has always been at its best when you're staring slack-jawed at your TV, repeatedly muttering, "What the hell is happening?" The series is excessive by nature. Bayonetta 3 is no different. From its opening seconds, you're thrown into large-scale fights, necessitating you juggle numerous enemies at once while switching weapons, summoning giant monsters, and dodging attacks. To that end, when you're playing as Bayonetta, it's the best the series has ever felt. But that's a small complaint at the bottom of the mountain of compliments. Bayonetta 3 is an absolute blast. It's bombastic, over the top, and extravagant, leaving ruins literally in its wake. I may be hesitant about the series' future, but at the present, this is the best Bayonetta has ever been. Okay, good to know. Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. In 2017, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle proved naysayers wrong by offering a well-crafted tactics game that successfully blended two very disparate franchises. Its sequel, Sparks of Hope, now must live up to fan excitement rather than dispel their doubt. Ubisoft Milan accomplishes this feat by returning to the drawing board, reworking its template and creating more streamlined, dynamic experience that maintains strategic depth. The core combat remains strong, but Ubisoft fleshed out the rest of the offerings to create a more wholly engaging package. Last paragraph. A charming, though uneventful, narrative about stopping a cosmic darkness from consuming the galaxy rounds out this delightful package. Like the best sequels, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope builds upon Kingdom Battle's foundation with smart tweaks and fun additions to emerge as a better game in every way. Got a 9. All right, FIFA 23. Much like my Liverpool fandom over the past 20 years, I vacillate between happy, obsessive, and begrudgingly bewildered with FIFA. Like Liverpool, When FIFA works like a well-oiled machine, play on the field is a beautiful, slick, and drives my football-loving brain to elation with dopamine hits. However, FIFA 23 feels like FIFA 22, which was very familiar to FIFA 21, with additions ranging from mildly impactful to invigorating. Last paragraph. There's a famous saying from former footballer Gary Lineker that football is a simple game. 22 men chase a ball for 90 minutes, and at the end, the Germans always win. I want to make a similar assessment of EA's yearly soccer game. FIFA 23 is a good game. It's flashy, fun to play, and has a lot of modes. But in the end, you realize it's mostly the same game you've been playing for years. 7.25. Yeah, so John Oliver on last week tonight, he says FIFA. No, not FIFA. But whatever the real tournament thing is that's playing soccer right now, they're kind of dirty, and they got a lot of slavery going on in that Middle Eastern new stadium they got going on. So just be aware. God of Ragnarok next to Godliness, GI must play of the month looks like. To call the 2018 God of War sequel a sequel almost does it a disservice. Yes, it was a continuation of Kratos' original multi-game journey, but it placed him in a new family in a foreign world to reflect on his past and try to secure his future. Kratos' journey to connect to his son while battling a new legion of distrustful gods was a revelation in both video game storytelling and action, setting a high bar for the inevitable sequel. Ragnarok may lack the unique impact of the prior game, but everything that worked so well the first time comes forward again, along with a story that earns the proper definition of the term epic. Last paragraph. God of War Ragnarok feels a lot like God of War 2018, which is a compliment considering how fantastic that game was. Sony Santa Monica was right to not break what wasn't broken, and it has expertly continued the story threads that were left hanging from the previous game. Any complaints about the overall experience, familiar combat, collecting and leveling up equipment isn't particularly interesting, are quickly forgotten in the face of the compelling narrative, believable character relationships, and incredible visuals and animation. Even from its early PS2 days, the God of War series has always set a high-quality bar for itself, and with few exceptions, it has always managed to leap above the bar. God of War Ragnarok is no different. 9.5. A Plague Tale Requiem. Going into Plague Tale Requiem, man, let's go to the last paragraph. I was relieved that when Requiem's second set of credits rolled, not because I didn't enjoy playing the game, but because the Dae'Run's journey in this game is tense and stressful for much of it. At times it feels too long and oddly sadistic in its focus on inflicting fake outs, pain and suffering on the Dae'Runs. Other times I admired Asobo's command of this series, its rat-infested stealth mechanics, and its grandiose storytelling. Fortunately, the latter edges out the former, and Requiem feels like much more than just a follow-up. With this journey behind me, I'm excited about where the series might go from here. But if Asobo plans a break from the franchise, rest assured that Requiem goes out with an impressive bang. Got an 8 out of 10. Tinkian executes its handful of ideas exceptionally well, making it a thoroughly enjoyable, laid-back journey that only requires 6 to 8 hours of your time. Don't let this delightful venture sneak under your radar. 8.5. Return to Monkey Island, another GI must play of the month. 9. Return to Monkey Island is profoundly nostalgic and relentlessly funny, and once again a kid laughing at Guybrush's umpteenth last-ditch effort to distract his opponents with "Look behind you, a three-headed monkey." Gotham Knights, 7.25. Man, they were talking big up on this guy, but he got a 7.25. The young generation of heroes manages to put a relatively good show even without their mentor along for the ride, albeit one that feels like it's not quite the same league as the Dark Knight's Greatest Adventures. Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, 7.75. The thrill of ghost busting eventually starts to wane, but it takes a while to get to that point, and updates down the road could help keep those proton packs humming. Dorfromantic balances its strategic and cozy elements well, and it's easy to fall into the serene trance of dropping tiles. Got an 8. New Tales from the Borderlands, 7. Ultimately, New Tales from the Borderlands feels like more of the same. Fans are likely to enjoy this, but given that it's been nearly 8 years, I wanted more of an evolution. All right, pretty different. The Last of Us Part 1 shows there's no such thing as a completely faithful remake. Even though it's a remake of a game released in 2013 for PlayStation 3, The Last of Us Part 1 is in most respects the same game as the original The Last of Us. Players first experiencing the game through the remake will understand the plot in much the same way. They follow the same story to the same conclusion, meeting the same characters and feeling many of the same feelings. The experience of the same vision of a post-apocalyptic United States where one traumatized man, Joel, reckons with his inability to part with his surrogate daughter, Ellie. Last paragraph. These visual reminders widen the scope of Part 1's world. In the original Last of Us, it was easier to abstract the dozens or hundreds of bandits and soldiers killed by Joel and Ellie into something other than humans. Their more personable faces help clarify the story further, showing that an entire nation lives beyond the spotlight shown on the main cast. Their fates changed by the bloody encounters with the protagonist, or narrowed into seemingly eternally barbaric future when Joel chooses to save Ellie's life rather than allow her death to provide them with a hopeful future. Last paragraph for real. The result is that Part 1, despite its many similarities, is a different game from the original Last of Us. Its characters are not the exact same characters as before. Its world is not the exact same world as before. And the experience of playing it is different enough that it becomes a new work, one that might best be viewed with a different draft of the same novel or a new cut of the same film. By recognizing those differences, both the 2013 Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 1 end up looking like more than just an older and newer version of the same story. All right, Arcade After Hours. We travel to Osaka, Japan. Gear up, game on. What does that see? GameStop exclusive design TWS touch control gaming earbuds. Okay, yeah, regular stuff. All right, anyway, Arcade After Hours. We traveled to Osaka, Japan as part of this month's Street Fighter 6 cover trip. While there, we met with Capcom at their headquarters, but 2 full days of Street Fighter 6 meetings weren't enough. We kept the fun going at a local game center, and director Takayuki Nakayama and producer Shusei Matsumoto put on a show for the fellow arcade goers, displaying their skills on Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 4, and Street Fighter 5 cabinets. While there, Nakayama told us his first job with the Street Fighter team was delivering the latest Street Fighter 4 builds to that very same arcade. Man, arcade, Japan got all the best arcades. Looks like an NES on the board. That's pretty cool. Like a Famicom, not an NES. Looks like a Famicom. That's wild. All right, that has been Game Informer Street Fighter 6. December, I take it. All right, like, comment, subscribe. Folio Games. Live long and prosper.